Chris, you made a noise right during the intro music. You couldn't have timed that any better.
I'm
Uh,
eating.
oh, even more professional on a professional podcast, no less.
The standard is set.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Virtual Voice Podcast, and for the record, that intro pretty much went off without a hitch, except for your stupid nomming.
Yeah, well, you know what? And I also noticed that the whole little channel supporter icon thingy, not the whole thing. It's not what you said it was. It's not Pop-Tarts, by the way, Jenna. It is A&W. They have A&W in the States? Anyways, you know what? We're up to a rough start. Welcome, everybody, to the next episode. I don't even know the number. Jenna.
87. 87.
There we go. Jenna, thank you so much. Jenna c'est quoi? That is awesome. Ryan set up the membership thingy that YouTube does, where you can subscribe to the channel and you get like little icons and stuff. I don't really know. It was requested. It's actually not us just being shills. It was requested. So
yeah, I mean,
awesome.
So Jenna, thank you so much for the subscription. That's awesome. I'm gonna actually tweak all those icons and stuff. I just had to kind of throw things together very, very quickly. I'm gonna make it a little more personalized and a little better. But yeah, for those of you that are currently out there in YouTube land or whoever's listening, you can now support the channel and us specifically. Same thing, via YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. You get to see the icons and emojis. I will share all that stuff. Jenna should actually get a message saying how to do emojis. It's all just stuff from the podcast, nothing crazy yet. But I will work to personalize that stuff. So there you go. And of course, you Patreon subscribers, thank you to you guys as well. And, whatever happens on Patreon will also happen on YouTube. So if we do give away game codes to our patrons, which we do semi-regularly, once every few months, I do give out codes specifically to them. That will also apply to our YouTube members as well. So you guys will get the same benefits regardless of which platform you support us on. Boom.
See, but I'm friends with Jenna in real life, and so now I feel like it's friends with benefits, and I feel like the Livinator may have problems with that. Anyway, yeah, that's awesome. So, guys, we'll figure this out as we go along. Like I said, it was requested, so we're just doing it. And I don't know, off the top of my head, I feel like maybe patrons should get access to the membership thing, but I don't know if that's something we can. I don't think we can do that through YouTube. So I don't know. We'll figure it out. So welcome to the episode, everyone. Now get off on a better start like that. I am going to be eating here. sorry. You know what? Sometimes supper time happens at the same time, and we're not friends in real life. Oh, so that's how it is. Okay. What have you been playing, Ryan?
Well, obviously my review for tomorrow's release of Overdark, a Do Not Open story, dropped today. So I was playing that really pretty much up until the review. You guys can obviously watch the full review on our channel. I enjoyed the game without going into too much of a spoiler for my reviews. If you're looking for a walking sim puzzler horror, it's right up your alley. It's definitely kind of a higher quality version. I will say something I forgot to mention in my review is the fact I actually played an early version of the game. I actually forgot that. So there is a day one patch dropping tomorrow alongside the release that should fix and hopefully address some of the issues I brought up. I'm going to hopefully check that out and get back to you guys, I guess, next week in regards to that fix. Something I'm also planning on doing by next episode as well is actually diving back into Foglands, as that game has seen a lot of updates in the last few weeks and months. And they're promising an overall better experience. So I plan on talking about that next week on the pod as well, and just kind of see, what's changed and whatnot. But yeah, otherwise, no, it's been mostly Overdark and waiting ever impatiently for Madison VR, which of course got the wonderful delay, which we'll talk about the reasons why here shortly. So no, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to actually pull a page out of Chris's book, and I played a little bit of Fallout 4 in VR. And I installed Fallout 1 on my phone, and I'm also playing Fallout 76. With the show coming right away, I just got so hyped up over Fallout. I just need to get back into that. I love the Fallout series. I absolutely adore that series. So I've been kind of dabbling on the flat side of things, as Fallout 4 in VR vanilla is an absolute mess. It is not fun to play. It is awkward to control and weird, and it's bizarre to me that a studio like Bethesda was like, yep, this is the right decision. This is the perfect way to play this game, because it is
I'm
Not
sure
good.
it's all about mods, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I have to dive into that. And I want to show it to you. I guess I haven't done it yet, but Genghis has put together just late last year an actual full comprehensive Fallout 4 mod list, or Fallout 4 VR mod list rather. So I do plan basically checking her videos and following her advice to make this the quote unquote best version of the VR game to play. So a little bit of Fallout 4 VR, Overdark, and other Fallout stuff. But Chris, what have you been playing?
Helldivers with a side
Still, get over it.
of Helldivers, and sometimes just to mix things up and have a palate cleanse. Helldivers. But no, I mean that is not a lie. But I have been playing Medieval Dynasty. Um, a New Beginning, I believe, is the Quest version of that. And I want to do a bit of a. We're going to do a bit of a quickie review here because this is a much bigger game than I thought it was going to be. I'm not saying it's necessarily. Hmm. Let's just leave it at that. Let me jump into my review here for Medieval Dynasty: A New Beginning. Not to be confused with the PC version, which is just Medieval Dynasty. This is definitely a VR spin-off of that game. Now, unlike say Sniper Elite VR, where it's a really, really minimized version of the core experience that was almost like open world maps, Medieval Dynasty: A New Beginning on the Quest is definitely trying to deliver the same experience, though it doesn't. It's not quite as massive in its scope, and I'll get into that. Now, for those of you who are wondering what type of game this is, it's definitely kind of a settlement management, crafting, survival game. My closest comparison to this game would be a Township Fail. I mean, a Township Tale.
Aha.
And this is a single player experience. The PC version is a co-op experience, and this is very much not that. And I would say it definitely hurts. It's hurting because of that, just in the fact that like a lot of the things that you do in the game world are very simple and mundane. Like it's trying to, I guess, just feel like what it would be to be a day-to-day villager in this old society, and having friends along with you just to like goof around and throw things at you might have like spiced things up. Now, I said to Ryan, I'm really confused because I've seen some other reviews of players, out there that will go unmentioned, but other content creators, and they're just like, "This game is awesome. Why can't I stop playing it?" And I'm like, "I don't know why you can't stop playing it. I'm not understanding this." If you guys have followed the channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of survival games, crafting games. I like the grind. I have no problem, making it my own fun. But the problem I have with Medieval Dynasty: A New Beginning is that I find the whole process just very simple and very tedious. One of the things that it definitely has going for it though is its systems in which you do everything in this world. And I feel like in that area of the game, something like Township Tale could really pay attention to how you do these things. Now, starting out, all the missions, like every single mission, whether they're side missions, but mainly all the main quest missions, are they all feel like tutorial missions in some ways. And I'm sure the game's going to open up, but I'm 3 hours in and I'm still just like meeting townspeople that show me how to like make pottery or make a spear or make a bow or make a potion or build a house or cut a tree or drink water, and these interactions with each of these characters is super generic. And that's one of my problems with the game is that it's just I never felt like I was living my medieval dynasty uh experience. I felt like I was playing a really, really dumbed down PS2 era RPG. Like, and I don't mean that just from a visual standpoint, but I'm getting it in the graphics. But from a gameplay standpoint of view, like not the systems in which in the VR systems, which I actually really like, but just from the walking up to the person, you look at the person, you wave at person, maybe they notice you're waving at them. That's a huge frustration. I hope you're playing gameplay footage while I'm talking, by the way.
There is gameplay footage playing now. Yes.
and And I was just like, what is going, like, it's such a broken system. I'm sitting there like waving at them, looking down, trying to get in their faces. So it's hit or miss with that. And then you get this really, they go, hello. And then you get to read the dialogue like it's like an NES game. And then
Old
you move on to
school.
that. And the voice acting is like barely, it's barely there. And the music itself is super repetitive. It's okay, but it's like two songs. There's like the nighttime dun 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 song, and then there's the daytime song. That's about it for music. I get it, quest, small memory, whatever, but it's very distracting when it comes to the entire immersion of being out in this open world. I found that the open world sound effects are serviceable, but I digress. Getting back to this main gameplay, you start out and you're just going through the tutorial stages for hours, and it's very much back and forth fetch quests, fetch quests, fetch quests. The building mechanics, you build your first house, you build a couple of like crafting stations, and that's just kind of how they just dole it out. The game has a basic upgrade tree system as far as like skills goes. These seem to be doled out to you as you gain the game's form of XP, which is pretty much reputation, I guess, in the town. And that seems to be kind of like how the game flows out. The main objective of the game really seems to be grow your town, like not your town, so your homestead. So it's like build a house, build a hunting lodge, build a wood lodge, you know, and then stay hydrated, eat. Those are also pretty easy to maintain. Like you're constantly having to deal with them, but like literally you could just eat berries and mushrooms. I ate everything I found. Nothing made me sick. I ate raw meat, didn't make me sick. So I was kind of like, why? The only reason I would even investigate further into the game's crafting systems to make stews and different type of recipes is just so that I didn't have to like worry as much as far as like eating bushes as I went by. But whatever, it gave me something to do, because that's another problem, is that the game world is open, but it's boring. There's nothing. I mean, you might run into some people like, kill this bear for me. Okay. That's about the extent of like, I mean, it's boring. The world does not feel alive. Yes, it's inhabited, but not by anything that feels like real. It's like, oh, there's a bunny. It's like they feel like they just dropped in animals and stuff. And it's just the whole world feels very generic and undercooked. And it's not that big. You look at the map, it's like, oh, it's like a nice big map. No, it's not. And the map doesn't have a lot of diversity to it. Not really. It's got hills and it's got rivers, and it has homesteads and stuff that you'll come across. But looking at the PC version, and I have to mention the PC version because you can play this supposedly in UEVR with the mod, and it's a drastically different looking game visually. I mean, talking about the visuals for a minute, I found that the Quest version is ugly. It's ugly.
I was gonna say it actually doesn't look bad in the footage I'm seeing. It doesn't look
It
amazing,
looks
but for
okay
the
in the footage.
quest, it looks like it's a pretty large scale,
Well,
like outdoor environment
it
and
doesn't.
stuff.
It doesn't. Yeah, it does. It doesn't seem like it's getting any questry enhancements, and it's got a little bit of lighting here and there, but it feels very, very questy. And what you don't see in social screens, and we all know this, is you don't see the fact that it's got the jagged edges. You don't see that it has a pretty aggressive foveated rendering, like where it's actually more of a top, bottom, and a distance thing is where it's rendering. And I was saying to Ryan earlier, it's got this weird thing where there's like you can see blurs on the lower part of the screen, but it almost comes in like lines. It's not just clear and then blurry. It's like clear blurry, and then blurry all the way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of distracting. I mean, anything 8 feet, 10 feet out, the detail just drops right off. Pop in is horrible. Like trees just. Bloop, 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 bloop. I mean, even you walk into your area. I'm like, I know my house is here. I know I built a house here, and all of a sudden, bling, there's your house. And I was like, I'm like, oh, it's just all these things just distract from the immersion. I saw some reviews on the Quest app there where people are like, this game is so immersive. I feel like I'm living out the experience of an early settler. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's but you know what? Maybe it's an expectation thing. Like you and I hated Township Tale. I found the entire experience of Township Tale to just be a test of endurance. And
I didn't get that far. I hated the experience for my what 2 hours in that game. I couldn't
like
handle it.
I love crafting games, but this I am yet 3-4 hours in now probably for it to get its hooks in me. Everything feels like a chore. Go get this. Okay, so I walk and I'm running out of endurance, so I'm like huffing and puffing and I'm walking. It could be a 5-minute walk to the herbalist. Hi, go get me flowers, these 2 flowers. Go get 5 of each. So I go out, I get 5 of each. I come back, they're like, "Thank you. Now you can make this. Here's a potion. Go to my potion bench." Go to the potion bench. Bloop, 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 stir, stir, stir. I got a potion. Okay, now take this potion to this person. Another 5-minute walk. Here. Thank you so much. My wife will be healthy now. Ding, ding, ding. You've increased your reputation with the town, and you go on to the next thing. And it's just like it's not. And the problem is that the game itself is I guess ultimately when it comes to survival crafting games, it's kind of like, why am I doing this? It's like, okay, I'm building up my town because I need to buff my character and get experience so I can go explore and scavenge the world or defend my base, or like in the forest games, it's to survive the cannibals, and you're trying to like just like beef up your base to enable to kind of further your length of time that you can survive on this island. I never felt threatened in this game.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a bear, there's some wolves that might get you at night, but and I mean, I hear there's some combat later on, but everything's just so undercooked and basic and simple. I mean, if you love survival games, if Township Tale did it for you, this might be the game for you. I mean, graphically, I would say it's comparable to Survival Nation on the PC. It's just, or sorry, on the Quest. It's just very generic looking, very simple, lots of pop in. And to me, like in an open world game, when it's that generic and bland looking, I don't want to be in it. I don't want to be in this world. It's not enjoyable. I'm not taking in the landscapes. I'm not.
Those wolves are not afraid of fire, are they?
No, they didn't give a shit now, did they? They gave zero fucks. Um, and anyways, I'm just I want to get back to the one thing though that I did enjoy about this game is some of its VR systems are on point, which is amazing considering it is a port of a VR of a flat game, and they could have phoned it in with a lot of X buttons and a lot of a lot of just like hit this button, and they've done a really nice job of kind of blending a sense of simulation and arcadey. Whereas I think
Hmm.
Township Tale went hard on the sim side and then just like also wanted you to figure it out with like pretty much no tutorials. This game still kind of wants you to figure it out a little bit, but it's intuitive. Like for example, the pottery bench. I think they told me what to do and I skipped the dialogue. I didn't read it. My fault. But it was kind of like, "Okay, go get I got some clay." You went up there and you're like, "Okay." So I dropped a bunch of clay and then a clay block appears and you're like, "Okay, so this spins." I'm like, "Well, what if I spin and put my hand on it?" And guess what? There it goes. It starts and I had chosen a recipe first and it said drop 5 clays in there, and then I just ran my hand up and down until it kind of shaped what the recipe said it was. It's basically just until it's white in the area. It's like, okay, that kind of makes sense. That was pretty simple and it was pretty fast. And it was like, a far cry from some of the crap that they did in Township Tale. It was if it was you need a spear to go hunting, and that would be in like the quest. So I would click on the quest that said you need a spear. It would automatically flip the page in the book because everything's coming from this book, and it would automatically flip to the recipe of how to build a spear. And you would click on it, and then bloop, like a lighted spear would appear in front of you, and it would say throw 2 sticks and a stone in there. So you do that, and it did it. I mean, everything was very thought well out. Like you have a backpack, you have holsters on your hands, all your health is on your wrist, and your book is all your map and missions and recipes. It's all very simply laid out. Everything is
Boring.
easy.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, but easy. You want to build a house. It's like the crafting systems are very undercooked. They're very basic. Build a house. Okay. So you choose build a house. You you take it till it's green, you drop your house, you go up to the individual walls on the house and it says this, choose your wall type. So you're like, okay, wood, thatch, whatever. And then it's like, okay, you need like 3 of this and 5 of that. So you make sure you have it. You kind of throw those things at the wall. You get a hammer, you hammer it, bang, bang, bang. Those 3 things drop off. Wall's built. I mean, they made it simple, but in its simplicity, it also loses complexity, which makes it a much more shallow experience.
I think I'd
And
rather go play Cube again.
well, see, this is the thing, right? It's kind of like Cube gave you nothing to do, but you kind of got caught up in its kind of the awe of it, and there was a sense of exploration. This game has no sense of exploration, has no sense of awe, but it does give you lots to do.
You just
So
picked up like 5 trees worth of trees, like nothing.
I know it's simple, and I did like that, right? Again, the problem is that it's just a very simple experience. And if you're someone who just wants to go through all your checklist of things to do and like get your upgrades, like, oh, I can now run a little bit easier, I can carry a little bit more stuff, because obviously you can be overweighted. But there's just nothing, there's no goal at the end other than to grow your homestead and increase your reputation in the village. I never wanted to get to know people. There was never a mystery. There was never any kind of an antagonist. There, I did see on the PC side, it looked like there were like caves you could go dungeon crawling with your friends, and I was like, this doesn't seem to exist here. But I can see that the game has things from the PC version that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it has ambitions where it says like you can get farm hands and you can start to task them with things to do. And this is where it becomes kind of like a bit of a, like I said, a homestead farming simulator. Now on the
Oh my god, you're killing
right?
me over here, man. You're killing me.
Yeah. Now on the PC version, it seems like it actually gets into settlement management. You build a town and and it sounds like it starts to get into like a little bit of like, like I think you have to pay taxes in this game too, but it seems like you can actually increase your reputation and your place in the town and become the mayor of said town. And there's a lot more to that. So if you, like I heard, like if you're really into Sims or any kind of like world building game, the PC version gets into that a little bit more. Although I still struggle to see a big reason for why. Again,
Final thoughts, Chris.
keep,
Final thoughts.
keeping a city running, that could be ambitious. My final thoughts lead into our topic today. Actually, I'm glad you asked me this. And the question was, or I guess not the question, but so much my takeaway from this game is, should this game even be on Quest? Because my answer to that is no. I get it. This is where VR is at. But this is so limiting on the Quest, especially visually, but also in the scope of game, even just the scope of the world, that the VR systems in this game are brilliant. They like I will actually say brilliant. Everything works so well in just the storage, the building, the crafting, the way that they implement all that stuff. Even if you think it's very simple, I feel like it almost kind of needs to be in VR because it can get a little cumbersome. We've seen that. We've seen how that plays out. Um, I mean, I would rather play Song in the Smoke. I would rather play. I'm talking about Quest stuff, but I would rather play Song in the Smoke. I would rather play Green Hell. They're all way more captivating games. They just feel like they got their hooks in me. This game, it's too mundane. It's too generic.
Mm.
But I get back to my original point is I feel like this needed to be on more powerful hardware in order to fully develop the scope. Because if this world was amazing to like live in and walk around, the immersion and the experience and wanting to live in that world would almost be enough for some people. Right now, I don't live in this world. I don't want to walk around this generic pop-up filled blurry bleh. I mean, yes, it has weather patterns, it has seasons, which is nice. You can survive in the cold and you can see the trees turn. But that could have been so impactful if it had visually been able to deliver. And I just feel like they neutered this game for Quest, and it just didn't need to be on this console, this headset. And
No,
so
we've seen this countless times in so
yeah.
many games that have like it's their contractors showed it. There's always when it's the main game, but then there's like a secondary title after, like Medieval Dynasty, and this was a new whatever you call this game. There's always like this after subtext that tells you this isn't the same game, but it's like part of the license, and now it's been VR-fied and simplified and then reduced down to its bare bones, and that's where it falls apart, especially when something of this scope and magnitude just like you said, just doesn't translate well to headset. You said when immersion is no longer your number one goal, or it's just so hurt by the platform because it just can't do the things it does, then the game suffers for it. I think that's kind of the big takeaway here is that, yeah, these spin-off franchises that are given the VR title, it's disappointing, I guess, really is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing when I feel like they've gotten the VR systems so down. Um, like when it plays well. I mean, it has a few things I'd like to see ironed out. I ran into a few bugs here and there, but it plays well. All of its fundamental systems, I just don't care, and that's the biggest thing. I don't care. It's not fun. And it didn't get, and maybe that could change, if I get, in a 5, 6, 7 hours in, but I feel that's pretty poor when you're hours in and you're still just doing generic tutorial type fetch quests. And I'm not starting to, I can't wait to grow my house and be able to do all this and this and that. There's no, you know what it is? I guess other than just checking off missions, there's no carrot on the stick. Uh,
Right.
and again, you're doing this all in a world that just like screams, just like should not be running on this headset.
Hmm.
And then, and that kind of leads into the topic today a little bit. I mean, we're not just talking visuals. Um, is that I mean, people. It's a little antagonistic, maybe our thumbnail and our topic today, because we're in no way like rah AAA games. Like that's not. I think that's not. We're not our AAA developers, because I feel like that's a. I mean, we all know that like it's in a pretty bad space right now as far as creativity goes and recycled content, and they're no risk taking this and that. I'd almost rather play indie games these days, flat and VR. However, this is a this is an example of a game where it's this big open world crafting survival game with huge ambitions. And to be perfectly honest, I guess I don't really know if the developer of this game, um, Render Cube, is actually like a big developer. It looks like this is what they've done. I'm just looking
Hmm.
on PC here, so I wouldn't call them a AAA developer. It's got good reviews on PC, and this is not a PC versus Quest thing. It's just more of I think this was ported by a smaller company, and I just feel like this game deserved better. This scope, at least. Like I felt the same thing with Township Tale. I think that, like, for example, Song in the Smoke was a small game made by a indie studio, and I feel like they understood that they had limitations. I feel like Song in the Smoke knew it had a defined length. It had like a certain number of, like, say, chapters and like islands. It had like each area kind of had a main boss and something that you would get when you accomplish said thing. And it had a very definitive, like, kind of, I guess, beginning and end, and it ended, after it ran out of ideas, kind of thing. And it visually picked a style that worked within the quest, and that was an indie studio that I feel like, I hate to say it, but kind of like knew their lane.
Right.
They it was brilliantly made because they worked within all the limitations that they had. And then I feel like a game like Medieval Dynasty is like, you're not that game. Uh like, at least you don't seem to have the team size to be able to fully flesh out these ideas. And, like, for example, like all the villagers, they're all boring. They're all generic cookie cutter. They have no voices. It's like it's just all feels so undercooked. And and I guess it's like, leave it to the budgets, when the developers that have budgets, or go to PC and get a mod for it. Uh I don't know. Like, what is your take on this?
No, I mean you're not wrong. And there's this constant. It comes back down to, I guess, the big point there. The takeaway was immersion, and the biggest part of any VR game, in my personal opinion, regardless of the genre or anything else, is being immersed. Where VR, the term has been used multiple lots outside of VR, but in VR specifically, you want to feel like you're there. You want to feel like you have a presence in the game, or you lose yourself in that game, even if it's something like a third person thing, like even like Astrobots, where you still have a presence, but it's much less of a prevalent one where you're not the main character, you're a secondary character. I guess even Demio, or not Demio, Moss, sorry, the same thing where you still are interacting with the world, but you lose yourself. And I think the problem with these developers, I think what you're getting at is this: when these developers seem to bite off more than they can chew, it leads the first thing that gets sacrificed. It seems like is always immersion, whether it's scaling back on lighting effects or just dumbing down graphics or doing these things to stay within the scope of the original game. And when you factor in the headset, it does feel like like I haven't played Medieval Dynasty on the Quest, but from what you're saying, what I saw, it does look scaled back to a point where they were talking about like some cleaned up like PSVR 1-2 era graphics, and that just isn't great because now you're relying so solely upon gameplay to pass your game off as being playable in VR that it becomes an issue. Because for myself, especially of late, I mean, if your bar is the Quest, you've only ever played things in the Quest, then sure, like Medieval Dynasty might just be the most amazing open world looking thing you've seen because there just isn't a lot on there. But when you factor in other platforms, we see what we've seen, and you factor in the fact that VR is currently in a it seems like it's in a fairly large slump. I think games like this are the reason why. When you release a game, I mean, City Skylines, so Skylines VR.
Yeah.
We get that.
That's a perfect example.
This is the franchise that took over SimCity. Like SimCity killed itself. It didn't kill City. SimCity killed itself. Wonderful job, EA. And then Skylines took over, and Skylines became the de facto city builder game. So then when we get this City Skylines VR, it's this VR spinoff. You're like, yeah, like the city builders coming to the Quest or on PSVR 2, and you're like, yeah. And then you find out the scale's been dramatically reduced, and the whole game has been scaled back to be built to the lowest common denominator, Quest 2. Well, then now you're like, well, why am I playing this version when I could be playing the better version outside of VR? And that's ultimately what it comes down to. I mean, I just told you I was playing Fallout 4. I mean, this isn't the same example, but the implementation of that is so poor. After about 2 hours of playing and trying and just fumbling with the controls, I actually I was like, I'm just gonna play this flat. And I think that is kind of a big takeaway, is that why would I play this in VR if I can play the better version flat?
I mean,
if it looks better, plays better.
Yeah, and a game like City Skylines, you have to ask, is it good? Are you gaining enough in VR for what you're losing?
Yeah.
And I think the answer to that is no. In that situation, absolutely no. And then you've got Little Cities, which is like a better example of maybe working within.
Endream stayed in their lane. Actually, it's not Endream. They published. I can't remember who made that game.
But you know what I'm saying.
Purple Yonder, I believe.
And like we joke a little bit about staying in your lane because I'm all about these people that are like, no, we can do this, And like I said to Ryan, I'm like, when we start talking about this topic, I think of Arcane Age. And for those of you who are not familiar with Arcane Age, you got to go check it out.
It looks amazing.
And
I'm gonna throw the trailer up if I can find it.
It looks so good that I said this, I think, in the last episode. My immediate reaction was, okay. Can they deliver on this? And I am worried about it. It looks too good. Zenith was another one where I watched the trailers and I'm like, okay, who is this developer? Like, are they? This is a very, very ambitious project. Then you play Zenith and you find out, okay, it's got a lot of good ideas, but it's got a really empty world, and there's only 2 classes, and it's got a ton of recycled ideas, and most people burn through what that game had to offer within the first couple of weeks. And and
on that note, quickly, I guess, just in case people aren't aware or are listening, that game is now free across any platform you play that on, and they have increased the content count and everything else. Yeah. So if you guys are curious about Zenith, it's now free to play. They've switched modes and models. My understanding is the game didn't sell as well as, well, I shouldn't say, I don't know if it sold as well as it did. I think their pricing model was a bit off as far as their in-game purchases. I don't think they were kind of sustaining themselves the way they wanted to. So now it's free to play. So if you are curious about Zenith, it is free to play on across any headset. So it's a free game. It's a massive game. I've heard lots of praise. 20, 30 hours of content. Something to check out. Anyways, Chris, I apologize.
Zenith is a better. It is a better experience, I thought, than Medieval Dynasty. Even though they're vastly different games. Like one's an MMO and one's kind of more of a survival sim. I'm not really comparing them in that way, but there was more to do in Zenith, or it had more of a fully realized kind of like game loop, I guess, with a reason to be playing it. Though it still was lacking a lot in that area as well. But I digress. I mean, I just saying that when I look at a game like Arcade, I'm kind of like, this looks too good. Like it looks like it should be coming from a bigger developer, and I'm afraid they don't have the resources and the team size to deliver in the vision. I'm
I mean,
afraid
look,
it
and I
looks
can actually,
too good. I hope I'm so wrong. It looks amazing.
and we talked
But
this before, but this is the same studio that made Merville's VR Adventure.
okay,
Which, if you go back from Merville's, then go to Merville's to what was their second game?
Shadow Legend.
Shadow Legend. Like the improvement from first game to second game is so like you can like
That's
this
true.
is a studio that's
That is
learned,
true.
and that alone has given me faith that Arcane Age is going to be the game that we see. But I totally hear what you're saying. It does look way bigger than it looks like. It looks like saying AAA is not quite right, but it
No.
looks so damn close to like being something special in VR that you can't not like anyone who watches this trailer, if you're a VR enthusiast, I wish I had the trailer available. I apologize, but go watch it. And you like if you like action RPG stuff, like this looks like the perfect action RPG. It looks amazing. Like amazing.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous. But I mean, Shadow Legend is a perfect example to what I'm talking about. When you just saw the trailers, especially because it was on PC first before we got it on PSVR, and if you looked at those trailers, you were like, "Oh my god!" And I remember being like, "This is the Skyrim killer. This is the one. It looks amazing," and it did, and it does, and it has some great systems, and it plays pretty well. But you start to realize also it's really small. It had all these great ideas and decent visuals, but it was like this really small space, and it did feel like kind of a tease
Mhm.
to the bigger game that you wanted. I'm hoping that's Arcane, but it's just an example of what I'm talking about just like whether I don't know. I mean, here, let me just backtrack here. I was thinking when you were talking there that I get it, and I get caught up in it as well all the time in the fact that as VR gamers, we get so frustrated that developers aren't making the games we want, like especially the big developers, the ones that have these IPs that we want to see or that we want to experience in all their glory. And so I really can't blame developers, smaller developers for going, okay, well, let's try to do that. Let's give them fill in the blank game in VR, even if it's like their version of it. Yeah, it doesn't. It's like I don't blame these developers for trying to capitalize on that by trying to offer us the things we want, you know, in VR, even in its whatever kind of way they've cooked it up, and it often feels underbaked. I feel like most of the best VR games that we've ever played outside of like those amazing AAA experiences that we've gotten are usually games that were VR first
Mhm.
and then built themselves up like that. I mean, I immediately think of like Super Hot, I guess, as an example of that. That's not something to live or die on, but I'm just saying there's an example of a game that was like, this is what we're going to deliver, and we're going to nail it.
I mean, I can tell a story. I've told it before on this podcast, I believe. I'm sure I have, but I remember when Sin Studio. This is after the Perfect Sniper, I believe, or no, it would have been after Warzone. I think Warzone was their last release before Swordsman, and they'd actually were on Reddit and they're like, "Hey, come join our Discord. We want to ask people what they think our next game should be." I was like, I'll hop on board for this conversation. So I actually was there for the conversation when they were basically discussing how they wanted to make a like a 1v1 or at least a melee combat game. They're talking about Swordsman basically. I remember being in chat and trying to chase them off the idea because I was like, you guys don't have the experience, and if from based upon your back catalog of games, which was not great at the time. I mean, there was 4 games. One was well received, like one was received like medium, and then 2 were just like hated. I was like, I don't think you guys have like Blade and Sorcery was already out there in the wild. I was like, you guys cannot do this. It's just not possible for you. and that's the direction they went. And they gave us Swordsman, and of course they've been developing and improving upon Swordsman for the last like what 3 years. It's been ages. Like he's been out for a long time now, and it's a solid game. They've definitely made that game. I didn't think they could when I joined when I joined that chat, and they did. They did make the game they intended to, and it's not a bad game. If you want like that melee combat, it is. It feels very refined now. I can't say it's like the best, but I think that's just an issue with VR more than anything else. But it's solid. I mean, and it's something that I didn't think they had the stones for. So to sit there and say, and I'm back and forth in this thing. 'Cause I totally agree with you that when we see developers bite off more than they can chew, then it's like, yeah, like what did you do? Like we told you guys, like what'd you expect? But then you see these other developers who do knock it out of the park, who do give us, legendary tales after Mervils. I remember they said from the guys that made Mervils, it's like, oh, okay, sure, right? Like, why would you take that seriously? Like Mervils wasn't an awful game, but it released at a time when there's just nothing else out there like it. So it was kind of just more like the bar was so low, it just okay,
it's
fine.
Mario
it's here.
64 in VR.
But I mean, yeah, right. But it didn't even look as good as Mario 64. It was rough. But that being, and I'm not trying to slam their game, and this is also like a 7-year-old game now. But then when they go from that to Legendary Tales, and you're like, oh damn, like who would have thought you guys could do this? Because based upon your first game, I wouldn't think so. I mean, I guess even going as far as more recently, Richie's Plank Experience, guys.
Yeah.
These guys had Richie's Plank Experience, and all they did for the last 7 years was just update and tweak Richie's Plank Experience. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're going to release a 3D platformer very much akin to Astrobot. And we're like, whoa, like how many people are at that studio who has experience making a 3D platformer? And, that turned out to be Max Mustard, which you can find a review on this channel as well. It's pretty damn good. Like it's one of the, it's actually, in my personal opinion, out of everyone's that played, it's second to Astrobot. It's better than Ven. It's better than Lucky's Tale. It's better than anything else that's in this conversation. Just Astrobot's still king for a variety of reasons. I mean, the power of the PSVR 1 even, and first-party PlayStation Studio. But Max Mustard is legit. And this is from a studio that made a game where all you do is walk on a plank, more or less. So to sit there and be like, if they're like, yeah, we're going to make a platform, I'm sure everyone would be like, dude, why? Like, you don't, what? But they did, and they did an amazing job considering. So,
you know what?
You can go back and forth.
They were looking at, they're like, all right, so like, what have we done? Well, we did a game where you walked out on a platform, and they're like, platforming? Well, we know how to do that. That's the next game, buddy. We're doing a platformer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just frustrating, I guess. Tropico's another game that came out this week, and I was hoping to have played that, and I was hoping to have a review up, but they locked us out until the game dropped. Never a good sign. So even though we had codes, we couldn't play it, and I was going to play it today. That didn't work. But I am concerned that when you look at the trailer footage of Tropico, especially if you are familiar with the franchise, I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being a City Skylines experience. At least it sure looks like it. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because I love God games in VR. I mean, here's an example of another developer kind of like, I think, realizing the limitations of maybe their team size, but also the like the I guess the ecosystem that they have to build for, and that would be Townsman VR, not to be confused with Township Tale. Townsman was like a simple God game, and I really liked it. It was and it was really VR. Like, I mean, the way you could like pick up and throw guys, and like pick up little fishes out of the water, and there's windmills, and you could hit those, and you could knock around the clouds, and I mean, you could really exist. It really felt like a God game. But it never got. I mean, I wish it was more ambitious. I do. I kind of hit the ceiling of the combat and everything, and I wish the game had just way more to it. But I never felt like I was just playing this super compromised version of a bigger title. I felt like it decided what it was going to deliver, the experience it was going to deliver, and it nailed it. I mean, one of the titles I mentioned to you earlier, which I don't know. I mean, you guys can chat, can kind of play out in there. I'm of two minds of this, and the game is Demeo. And Demeo is one of my favorite VR games of all time. Still is. Still top probably still top 5 for me, to be honest. That game just worked, and I'm not even a D&D guy. I just loved that game, and everything about that, just from its execution to its visuals to how fun it was to play with people in the same space with that game, absolutely amazing. But it had no content. It really didn't. I mean, honestly, right now it has the content I think it should have launched with, which is like 5 maps or something. Like is and so there's also that. It's like sometimes these developers, they decide to like release a game and they release it and there's no content. It's like it's like the other way of getting around not having the budget or the team size. It's like it pretty much released in early access. Now, if someone asked me, "Well, would you not want Demio then?" Like that was you got one of your favorite games and you got it piecemeal. That's just the way it had to come. And I'm like,
Mm,
"Yeah, okay, fine. Sure." But I still feel like it plays into my topic of kind of like, did they bite off more than they could chew? Maybe a little bit. I mean, they're lucky the game played so darn well that people stuck with it, because
yeah.
there's a lot of games that have come out with like that level of content, one map, one campaign, that's what it launched with, and like 4 characters that people were just like, yeah, okay, bye. I mean, what the heck was it, Megalith?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a deep cut, people, if you don't know what game that was. It was that game that Ryan kicked my ass on.
Oh, is those were I still have the videos. I saved those for my channel just because they're so glorious of you
I
just
can't even
kicking.
remember what genre that was considered. It was like kind of a hero shooter, but you had minions. But it launched with like
I
one
mean,
map.
it was a MOBA, is what it was, but it was just it was, but
I
it
guess,
was.
yeah, you're right. It was a MOBA. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you're not wrong. That game released with one map, and they had plans for 2 maps, but and that's fine. But like, and releasing with one map is, I guess, fine. But the problem is that second map, I think, came like a year later, and in that time, all you do is remix the first map. So then you can't like play the same map. You switch sides, but it's the same map over and over and over and over again. I actually really liked Megalith, for its bones. But like I said, after a few weeks of playing, I was more than done with that game because there's like I said, there wasn't enough content to keep me coming back to play the same. It's like Street Fighter with only 2 fighters and one. Like it's like why, like you get to play Ryu and you get to play Ken, and that's it. And it's the same
Totally,
map, and
totally. Yeah.
but that's what it was, and it's fun. It's fun to hop in there for a little bit, but then after, I think every game kind of ended with like, I'm done. Like I can't beat the hell out of Chris one more time in this game in this same map.
Still be
I mean, I
fun.
could though. I could actually beat the hell out of him over and over and over again. I was cackling
I
with
know,
laughter.
man.
I might find a way to
Yeah,
post that video somewhere because
yeah.
it's glorious.
I mean, talking about this conversation, I mean, people are asking about they're asking you to expand on your Max Mustard
I
versus
have. I'm in there. I'm chatting. Don't worry.
but,
I'm not Max
but,
Muster versus
but
Corks as your call, but
hey, Corks is God. Enough of that.
another example I was going to say is
Enough of that.
something that's a little more, I guess, like, something like Hubris, which got a lot of praise for its visual styles. But as far as I was concerned, that game severely lacked in content and scope. Like it was a very bare bones shooter
Yeah,
that didn't do anything outside of the box. And even let's just throw it under the bus, but like they aped a lot of things from Halo, which is fine. It wasn't like they blatantly copied, but there was some clear parallels, which I'm sure they were going for as far as homages. I really hope they weren't just like, we'll just rip that off. But when that game first launched, and I know it's improved a little bit since then, they've actually included a new mode as well. But when it first launched, like getting to the end of that game was just a chore. The combat was just painful, and to sit there and then once again you see other YouTubers who are just like, "This is amazing, the most beautiful game in VR." And I'm not saying it's a great looking game, but gameplay wise, even when I played it on the PSVR 2 release, not much had changed, and it still felt really shallow, and the gameplay didn't justify the visuals. And it's this idea that yeah, like maybe these guys kind of bit off more than they could chew in regards to, they had an excellent design team, but as far as actual like AI programming and whatnot, it just, or design, it kind of, I don't say fell apart, but it definitely didn't feel up to the same bar as the presentation.
I actually think that you're bringing up Hubris as an example is a beautiful example of what we're trying to illustrate here, in the fact that it was a game that had visuals, and when you saw the trailer, you're like, "Oh my god!" This is it. And I know some people were just like, I mean, especially if you're a visual, like if you're all in on like that's what it is for visuals. Like, I mean, immersive wise, visual wise, yeah, you jump in that water, like I feel wet. Although that sounds dirty in retrospect, but uh, I do feel that like Hubris was one of those games that it was the developers like we're gonna make an action adventure title with this huge sci-fi story. It's gonna be super immersive, and we're gonna have crafting. We're gonna have like in-depth combat and it's going to be this deep sci-fi title. People are going to like it's just going to be like it's going to be the next Foundation. And it was kind of like, "Oh shit, but we don't really know how to write a sci-fi story." Not really. And we really can't afford proper voice acting. And does anyone here know how to do in-depth combat and AI systems around combat and building like like, memorable, fun combat like maps? Like just like anything. You just got in there and it was just like guys like and then they added it so they like ran away. But like you never felt like you were shooting anything that had like the intelligence past like this pen. And but that's the thing. Like it was like they got in there like we should do this game.
Yeah.
And it's like, should you? Like, do you have the team size? I mean, like really, and I mean I don't want trying to shit on people like taking a chance. But
Yeah.
like I look at something like lo-fi. And I'm thinking the same thing. It's like everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's gonna be cyberpunk." Is it?
No, I mean, Jesus, that needs to
It
be shut. Anyone who says that needs to shut the hell up, man. Like,
it's a
do not blow
beautiful
this thing up.
it's a beautiful looking game, but
It
it's
does
like
look very good.
one dude with like some help, I think.
Yeah.
And if you've played the game, like the early access title that you can play off of their website, last I checked in, it was this beautiful game with like a few things you could do in the world, but no real game loop, game system, upgrade system. It didn't really feel like a living, breathing, filled world. Like I just look at that game and I'm like, I wish there was a big studio making that game so we could get what we wanted. Because right now, I feel like I don't want to be negative. I hope it blows my mind. I hope Blair kicks my ass with that game. I
Huh?
really, it looks so good. But I, I don't. I think I'm gonna. It's just a. I don't see it. I don't understand how. I mean, so many times we've had these stories. We hear it in flat gaming, VR gaming, and it was like made by two men, made by a one person team. Yeah, sometimes it's amazing.
Vertigo.
But yeah, yeah. But I mean, that is in some ways an exception to the rule.
Oh, for sure.
Um, I do feel like the Half-Life comparisons are a little bit ambitious.
I mean, look. I mean, I'm not gonna like. He's. You can play it. But he designed
Yeah,
the game to be very much. It plays like Half Life. Like I'm not
yeah.
saying it's like the game design is very much structured around the same game design as Half Life. He just changed the entire presentation around that. But
Okay,
it's there. Those bones are there.
but to my point, like I've only actually played. I shouldn't really talk much on Vertigo 2 because I haven't played a lot of it.
Shut your mouth.
But in the first like 3 hours or whatever, like you there's that one part like where you get onto the plane and it like flies you around like that
Yeah.
open water area. I was like, I like the it kind of I was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like this like that's my perfect example. It's like this feels empty and generic and really undercooked. Get me back in the small hallways where you belong. Because I feel like that's where the game was at its best, was when it was driving in its lane. Are we okay over there?
Yeah, I can hear. I have my daughter's having a sleepover, so I told him to shut the hell up. But I can hear
Oh, it's a
hear
long
noises through my
weekend.
headphones. So I think they're being unruly children.
It is a
I know
long
it's funny.
weekend.
I'm going through the VRgrid.com right now. I'm going through a list of like just games, just trying to get more examples here of
That's a
it's
really wicked sight. Talk
it's
about staying in their
barely
lane.
serviceable, but it's still there, and it's actually a good reference for a lot of VR games because I've reviewed. I should say we've reviewed. But one, an example. I'm going through a list of games here and trying to find examples to kind of like justify this whole conversation. And then I got to Aspire One,
Yeah.
which I mean, Aspire One, I think we can all attest. Like that launch was an absolute disaster, and that was Metal Gear Solid in VR. Like this is like,
Perfect
oh my
example.
god. So I mean, and so obviously part of this is definitely the hype train,
Yeah.
and you know the advertising before this didn't do the game any favors because when you sit there and say Metal Gear Solid in VR, you've already set the bar so high, and considering that this is like the I want to say it's their first game. I could be wrong about that one, but their first VR game, anyways. And man, like that was it was so poor. I gave that plate. I gave the PSVR one version a 4.5 out of 10, and I
Yeah.
still like that launch version was atrocious. It was the no fun. It was awful.
And it was and
Um,
it got better because I actually reviewed it post patch.
yeah.
But I reviewed Aspire 2. I don't think you did you?
No. Why would I? Why would I?
Yeah.
Why would I
So,
play Aspire 2 when Aspire 1 was such a waste of my time? And I beat
yeah.
that game, and I was like, man, this sucked.
So what shocked me about Aspire 2 is, I mean, it didn't have the same launch problems as the last one did, where it launched on on Quest, PSVR, and PC, and all three versions were made by like different teams, and it all, or at least the PSVR version was definitely made with a separate team. And I mean, it was just there was no parity across all three, but the one, so visually there was no parity, but the problems in gameplay they all had. And what blew my mind was that Aspire 2 comes out, not much better. I mean, they launched on Quest only, so they didn't have that problem about parity of versions and being able to put all their resources into one game. But you still had this game, and this is where I'm talking about, like, ambitions exceeded their capabilities. And you had this game that there was like Metal Gear Solid in VR, and you tried, and they gave you this amazing movement system where you could climb anything, get anywhere in the world. You could get into the heating vents. You could climb on the walls and the roof, and you would turn off cameras and set up traps and look around corners and all these things that were very Metal Gear Solid in their kind of their scope. But it's like somewhere along the line they're like, oh, we need an AI system for the enemies that can
No, they
actually,
didn't. They didn't.
you know what I
No.
mean? But like that's the thing. It was like you're gonna make Metal Gear Solid, but with no. It's not like Metal Gear Solid had great AI either. But I guess they did have the skill set to create kind of I guess a game world and map design around those limitations, so it was still fun. This game
Mhm.
gave you way too much flexibility with an AI that couldn't comprehend. You could just
Dude,
you
I was poking. I was behind a soldier, just poking him in the head with my gun, and his head was like this.
yeah.
No, no reaction.
They
No, it
might
was
as
just
well
like.
just they might have just called it Aspire 2 Cheese Edition because that's all, because all you did, you could cheese everyone.
Yeah.
Even when they sent them en masse, like sending them in numbers doesn't make the game better. I
Mhm.
mean, it got better. It had better sound design. At least you could tell where a bullet was coming from and stuff. But they were still just like full blown retards.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you can't say that word. Screw it.
Can't say
That's
that
what
word.
they were. I don't care. That's what they were. And
They weren't that.
you know, it's like, yeah, it's like, you know what? That's not even fair to people with disabilities.
Right?
There's people sitting there going, "That's not funny." Um, but anyway, I digress. Uh, that's a perfect example of a game that just like shouldn't have been made. I'm sorry, but it shouldn't have. Like, and they didn't have the resources, and it just, I mean, there's gonna be people like, I really like Aspire. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I guess if you can get your expectations in check.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I get that this could be a divisive
Look, this is
topic.
the conversation. Like neither of us is picking sides here, but it is a conversation worth having because especially. I mean, especially is a bit dramatic, but as I said, the current VR market isn't great. So when you get these disappointments, when you get these developers who are making these big promises and then don't deliver, I mean, not only is it disappointing for us as gamers, but it's disappointing to the industry. It's like, when IGN decides to cover a game, it's like, well, this is garbage. Well, like how many millions of people, or how many people like read or watch IGN's articles that are now just like, well, this wasn't that great, or this kind of sucked, or whatever. And then that's when IGN does cover VR, when they very rarely when they do, and it's something like that, a disappointment. Well, that's the takeaway: is VR is still disappointing because if IGN's only covering one game every 3 months and that game is disappointing, what does that say about the 3 months that they're not covering games, right? So it's this kind of this snowball effect of like I said, these developers biting off more than they can chew or promising more than they can deliver.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
this
a really
isn't, I
good
mean,
point.
this problem just isn't, obviously this problem just isn't a VR problem by any stretch. But this is what this channel and
No,
podcast
but you
is.
bring up a
So,
really good point that when a game comes out and doesn't deliver, and like let's say it was too ambitious and doesn't deliver. Now, I feel like there's two parts of this conversation. There's one, it's like if a indie game comes out and it's trying to be it's making bold claims and then it's a flounder, like say like Espire, that really does that does way more damage to the VR industry than anything else. The other part of that conversation is when we see AAA devs come out and they drop the ball. We've seen that a lot. In fact, I remember I think we had an episode back in the day where we were just like, you could count on one hand how many times AAA developers have done a VR game and actually done it justice. I mean, like
mhm.
Hitman is an example, Hitman 3, where yeah, content was awesome, but execution was a shit show. Um, it was like, did you even get a VR team on that? I mean, that's where we talked about last episode, where like the flat to VR studio, where in theory that's a really good idea because if you could get a VR team to come in and VR your flat game, and you had people who knew VR doing it and who were telling you you can't compromise that, or yeah, I know you think that like people want that because it's like not it's going to be easier on their eyes, or you think they're not going to want to do that. No, trust us, we
Mhm.
know VR gamers, and that's why I do like what flat to VR, even if that's not it doesn't end up being what we want it to be. That studio, the idea there is solid, and so we've seen that kind of disappointment. So in some ways, you could flip this argument around and be like, AAA devs need to stay in their lane. It's like you don't do VR well, so stay the fuck out until you're ready to do it right. Because if you're going to come in and half-ass it, we don't want that either.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I'm actually on IGN's website right now trying to find their VR reviews. I can't even, like, the way they have this organized, I can't even find them. So I was trying to look for some examples here, but it's
So
just
they're
not going to
saying
happen.
they saying our cameras are gone in chat.
Nope. Okay. I can fix that. Discord doesn't like to be minimized, and I may have accidentally did that. Cameras should be back now. I apologize for that.
Nothing but quality, guys. Nothing but quality.
Discord's funny. It's like this Discord. Okay, look. Side note: Discord seems to be this constant mission to save bandwidth wherever they can. So it's just if you're not constantly keeping things active or moving, it's just like we'll just shut this down. Like we don't need this. Like so. Anyways, that's just dancing around these problems. We're back, baby. We're back.
Discord needs to stay in their lane.
Stay in your lane, Discord.
What, what do you think you are? Skype? Is there even a Skype anymore?
That's a good question. Because remember when Skype used to be installed on every single Windows?
Skype was video chat.
Yeah, then Microsoft bought
I'll
them.
Skype you, right?
It's like whenever these big companies buy these small guys, they just tank it because Skype was the only way to chat. And then yeah, now. Anyways, sidetracked. What's this game called? Espire.
We could talk endlessly about games like that just like it's just again it's like games that overstepped. One game that I was looking at our list here that made me think of it. Now I might get some hate in chat for this, but Propagation Hotel
Yeah.
is another game where like it's fine. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I think we'd all say it was a welcomed surprise of a game, and I did. I enjoyed it. But after playing it, I was like, okay, where's the rest of the game? Like, okay, you gave me 4 hours of game. Like, I got a couple of guns. This is a good start.
Yeah.
So the demo's over now. Can't wait for the full game. And I did. I felt like I was like, yeah. So where's the rest of the game? I mean, obviously, as VR veterans, it's like every time we see something coming out that's like part one or episode one, or like,
That's the problem with
oh
propagation.
god,
The problem with Propagation Hotel is it didn't say it was part one. Like that game ends in I'd say the middle of the story or like the first act, and nowhere in the game or a description does the game tell you it's a part one. And I remember talking to the developer because when I beat that game and it was like to be continued, I emailed them. I was like, is there like planned DLC or is there is there a chapter two? What's happening? And they said, yeah, there's gonna be another chapter, another release, assuming this one sells well. I was like, man, the balls on you guys to Like, how many times on PSVR in the life cycle of PSVR 1 did we get a
I
chapter
know.
1 game that we never saw a chapter 2 for?
Yeah.
And this was, like I said, this game ends very unsatisfyingly. I will say that. Like, I really liked I was surprised by that game. I thought it was done very well for a walking sim horror game.
Yeah.
Very much akin to Overdark, I guess. And it actually even looks really good on the Quest as well. Surprisingly good on the Quest. 2 anyways.
It looks okay.
But that game seriously, it seriously ends like it ends, it doesn't end. Like it's just like it's like you finished watching episode 1 on Netflix and now you're waiting next week for episode 2. But
Yeah.
next week is still months or years away.
And then Netflix cancels it. Doesn't that sound familiar? You know what? I want to talk about we talk about episode 1 promised future titles. I want to talk about Mortal Blitz, Ryan.
That's so. This is now the deep cut portion of our episode here.
I still haven't let go.
we got that Mortal Blitz. What the hell was it?
Exactly.
Garbage teleport.
And the other game was that. Oh, I always forget the name of it. Remember that game that came out? It had it was a PSVR 1. And it came to PC as well, I think. It was I always forget the title of it. Remember what people were like? It's the Uncharted of VR.
I love that game. Screw you. Immortal Legacy. Any game cats in the chat will totally back up Brian here. I back up Brian. It's amazing.
I liked Immortal Legacy a lot, and it had the voice actor who did The Witcher.
Oh my god!
I think it was. I liked that game. The controller issues aside, I really liked that game. But that was a part 1.
For the record, part 2 is being released flat. Last I heard, but that was also from Japan studio, I want to say.
Yeah, I know that whole thing. It was like a Sony studio. It was weird.
Yeah, it was very weird. But that Immortal Legacy, I said amazing. I'm gonna dial that back. I'm gonna overhype this game here. But Immortal Legacy was a surprise. It was like Uncharted in VR.
Where did this come from? Yeah, it was.
And then with some Metal Gear Solid elements, and then some just insanity thrown in just for spits and giggles.
But you could argue as much as I enjoyed it, you could also argue that that studio, like, you just wish it was better.
Oh no! It was a surprise at how it was surprising how, once again, this is one of those things where it's surprising how good it was, considering. But like the game also sold so poorly that they scrapped plans for any more VR. Because it was published through Sony, but it wasn't like a Sony studio. It's one of those. I think they had that initiative there where they were funding I don't want to say Asian, just for I don't remember which country, but Asian developers to basically bring their games. So I think that's one of the games where that came from. But anyways, yeah, as far as I know, Immortal Legacy Chapter 2, Immortal Legacy 1 has actually been released flat on like everything from the Switch and up. And I think in Chapter 2, assuming the game did make money, is planned to be flat only unless something's changed.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath. How about something like, if you want to talk about like the VR games just going so ambitious, and I was going, what? And that would have to be Honor and Duty D-Day. I mean, I gotta clap my hands to Reggie, but what? Like Battlefield? Yeah. One guy? Sure. Let's take on the Battlefield franchise. 64 players? Yeah. That's like the entire multiplayer community.
Yeah, I haven't played that. I played Honor and Duty 2 a bit since it launched. It's definitely been a messy launch. Like I played it early access before the release, and it definitely needed some work. And I played it after release, and I still thought it needed some work. And I know Reggie's still working hard at it, so it's the updates are coming. He updates the game often. I'm not sure if he has some deal with Sony or what, but he updates that game, I swear to God, like every other week, it seems like. But I'm not sure where the game stands at today. But you're not wrong. I mean, like, saying it's Battlefield, yeah, like I guess if you were to describe the game on paper using one sentence, sure, it sounds very similar to classic Battlefield, but in practice, it needs work. Is it bad? No, it's fun, but
I know,
in some ways it's fun for the wrong reasons.
I mostly say it in jest, because in some ways I also have to like give it to him that like that's amazing to try to take that on. And in some ways my hats are also off to these indie devs, especially these 1-man, 2-man, 3-man team things that are
he was the first person having multiplayer shooter on PSVR 1. Like he was the first one. It was 5v5 Honor and Duty. It was terrible. Terrible. It was not good.
So I'm glad you bring up that PvP studio, or the PvP aspect though, because I wanted to say like an example. This is why I was so disappointed with First Contact, in the fact that like one of the things that we've seen time and time again in the VR scene is companies getting into like PvP shooters, and they're a small company, they don't have the skill set, and they don't know how to make, like they don't have the background to be making proper like shooter maps. They don't understand balancing. They don't understand shooters. At least not. They don't really have the skill set.
You're
That, and
coming at
I,
First Contact for this?
but no. But my point is that First Contact, in on paper, was the right studio to take on a game like Firewall Zero Hour. Like when you looked at their resume of the people that were in their team, they had guys that had worked on COD. They had guys that had worked on Rainbow Six Vegas. They had guys that had worked on Halo. They actually like that, especially like I don't know what the team looks like, like
It doesn't look
now,
like anything now.
or yeah, but I mean even a year ago, I don't know, but the first Firewall, that game, I mean, a lot of those maps were really good, and you could tell that there was some talent making these maps. They understood map design and choke points,
Hmm.
and a lot of that game really worked. There's a reason why people played it over and over again, and it's addictive. I mean, you could argue that it was like, again, that was a game that suffered from scope, and that you could, but I guess my point is that like Firewall had the, at least the first one had the team experience to implement something like that, and so I feel like yeah, like that was them, like they belonged in that lane. I
I
guess
mean, the
based
second game might have actually been that well as too. They just screwed up the VR
wow.
implementation so much it was unplayable. I mean, like they use the same maps. You can't sit there and say the maps are
No,
suddenly, but
don't
it's
even.
just
I mean, that's another episode. I mean, that was a disaster. It was a disaster. And I mean, and we called it. I remember I getting in debates with people. I was saying like, you know what, bruh, you don't need manual reloads. Just like it was good before. Don't you love it? Well, we know who won that argument. Sorry to say it, but anyways, I digress. Uh,
But no,
I
I kind of want to get back. I really actually enjoyed the idea. We're kind of like bashing indie, but really kind of focusing more on these indie and smaller devs. But you had mentioned like these AAA guys who also dropped the ball as well. So like I said, the whole stay in your lane thing is quite vague, um, but not entirely wrong. Like I said, I'll go back
They
to
said the
Fallout.
flip side is true. It's like maybe you should just make flat games
Yeah,
if
like I said,
you're not going to bring in the skill set.
even going like I said, Fallout 4 is my most recent example, and obviously this isn't recent, but I just started playing it. And like I said, like Bethesda made the VR version. They also did Skyrim, and I don't know if you guys recall, I was playing Skyrim, like it was missing key locomotion features and whatnot with the moves, that made it really unplayable. And they did update that game. They even get the visual patch and whatnot. But Fallout 4, from what I can tell, I don't think unless they just fix performance stuff, like what's there, like it's unplayable, and it's the idea that, and it doesn't look nearly as good. I'm running this thing on max settings, and they've clearly just dumbed things down from the flat game regardless, because it doesn't look great. Like I said, to a point where I'm going to mod the hell out of this thing, but it's to the point now where it's like if Bethesda released Fallout 4 in VR, and you're like, yeah, woo, like this is a AAA game, AAA studio. We're getting one of their games in VR. F yeah, this is like what we want. This is what we want, more old games in VR. Heck yeah. And then you see this, you're like, womp womp. And if you go back and find the reviews for Fallout 4 in VR, the reviews were not flattering across the board from every outlet. They were just like, well, this is messy. It's kind of fun to be here, but on the same token, it's a
Yeah.
pretty ugly world to be in. And so you get these stories too, where like you said, where it's, maybe Bethesda should have hired a set of, hired a VR studio to port your game and not handle it yourselves when you clearly have no idea what you're doing. And you're also under the thumb of, Mike, I'm not under the thumb at the time, but you're a big enough studio now. You're under the thumb of someone to make sure this is making money or doing the right thing, or like you're following a certain guideline. Whereas a proper VR studio will just port your
Yeah.
game and adjust things accordingly. Like, dude, your Pip-Boy for Fallout 4, your Pip-Boy, like you look at your wrist, your Pip-Boy, right? It's
Yeah.
that easy. So in VR, because it's hard to see, when you hold it up to your wrist, your Pip-Boy like explodes in size on your hand. So it's like
Oh,
it's your whole thing. It's the most bizarre thing. It feels like you're in a cartoon version of Fallout where something is like, and then you put your hand down, it goes. It's like that's immersion breaking. Like it's like watching my whole hand explode just to see my watch. It's like what? Like like just make a watch. Like this isn't that hard. But I digress. My point being is, you know, I guess Medal of Honor is another perfect example of this where we've played Medal of Honor games for the last like what 20 years before we got Medal of Honor VR, whatever it's called. I can't think of it. Medal of Honor,
I know.
Honor and Duty. I don't remember. But Medal of Honor in VR, it felt so streamlined, and so it was still a long game. But the way they broke up the game and the way they tried to really kind of neuter the game in some ways, it felt like a poor man's Medal of Honor. It's like all we wanted was for you to make Medal of Honor VR, and you guys had to go and retrace steps and undo certain things you thought might, you know, hurt the player, and then you get this mess, you know, and it was a mess. This 120 gig game, massive game, probably one of the biggest VR games ever made.
Yeah.
And across the board, people were like, "It's
200
okay."
gigs. It was 200
Like,
gigs.
it's okay. Like
Above and
it's
beyond. It was
above and beyond. Thank you.
And it wasn't.
No, it definitely wasn't. And they fixed a lot of they fixed a lot of those initial issues. The game does play a lot better than it did at launch, but it doesn't. It's not a great. It's not amazing. It's not like this is like, yeah, Medal of Honor. You know, we're not getting Call of Duty, but we're getting Medal of Honor. Like this was the gaming war franchise for like years. Even when Call of Duty was around, it was like that was Call of Duty or Medal of Honor, and obviously Call of Duty went a different route and took over. But there was a time where it was a toss up. Would you like more, Call of Duty or Medal of Honor? And that was a conversation. And so to bring back these games too, bring back these older games to VR, and then crapping on that legacy even further, we're kind of getting a little off course here, or at least I am. But it doesn't do any favors either. Like Medal of Honor is back, baby. Like it was the first Medal of Honor game in like what 4 years, besides the last failure or something like that, or 5 years. And then it's like,
I feel like the moral of the story, though, like to bring it back, I guess, would be that like we flip flop between like screw ups in the indie scene by being too ambitious and not checking what your actual capabilities are, and then we have like the AAA scene that, like, you know, for all intents and purposes has like unlimited budgets and team size. You know, I mean, I know that's not true, especially when it comes to a VR port, but they've still got the team size and they do have a lot bigger budgets. And then they still screw the pooch. And I feel like the moral of the story is that there are two lanes, though. There's the VR lane and there's the flat screen lane. And regardless of whether you're an indie dev or you're AAA or AA or whatever dev, I don't even like those terminologies, but if you're big money developer and publisher versus indie developer, I feel like there's still two lanes, and you need to realize that you're in a certain lane. Like if you're in the VR lane, then you need to then flat rules don't apply. And you need to understand, and you need to, and if you're a big huge developer, you need to realize that like there's a different rule set here, and you need to bring in people who know how to do that. You can't pretend you know VR. You can't, like, mandatory click turning, you know, like say Happy Funland. I still think they were trying to hide the fact that the game couldn't do smooth turning without it being like shitting the bed. That might have been a Sony thing saying, no, this doesn't work unless you get rid of it. But regardless, we've seen developers do that many time and time again, where there's not smooth turning, or it's slow turning, or, you know, the controls just don't work properly. And it's like, have you played a VR game before? Did you make a VR game and never play a VR game? Did you do that? Like, I feel like I'm talking to a dog sometimes. It's like, no, put your ball down. Put your ball down. And then, you know, so then there's that. And then you get into the indie scene, and it's like, who do you think you are? You're not Ubisoft. What are you doing? What are you doing, Miki? What? An open world crafting game? What are you doing? No. Don't do that. You don't have the size to do this. And I mean, and it's super frustrating to me, because you take a game like Medieval Dynasty New Beginning, and I mean, we've talked about this before, and you go to like the Meta app, and it's like 4.5 out of 5. This game is absolutely amazing. It's so immersive. I'm like, oh my god, you're sucking the developer's cock. Like, no wonder that it's like they're not even, like, they have no reason to be better. You need to ask for better. You know, like Survival Nation. was just a weak game. And it's like, and it's, well, it was kind of fun. It's like, well, that's what you're gonna get then. Now I'm going on a tangent, but
I know. It's so easy. And I said distracted Rob, hello neighbor, which I mean, I don't think. Yeah, the smooth turning in Hello Neighbor was brutal, and that's another thing too. Like I said, it's those VR developers too that don't put in those options. Like going back to Overdark, I guess is a one where their comfort options are very limited. There's no blinders to my knowledge. It's only click or smooth turning. But the funny thing is you can only adjust the smooth turn speed or the click turn increments in the main menu. Once you're in the actual game, you can't change that stuff. So you have to go out of the game, back to the main menu to change it, to go back in the game and test to see if it works. And it's these little things. But just to your point, as far as like, like I said, like get the proper studio to make this thing, or like you just like they test these things. Like you must. It's crazy now that we're 7, 8 years deep into VR, and even technically more than that, if you want to be funny. And these problems are still being made. Like we made we did an episode years,
yeah.
months and months ago, but like just the mistakes developers make, and it's hilarious that it's still happening to this day. I mean,
I know we were like, here's an instruction manual, guys,
yeah,
for you developers. Just follow these rules, and everything will be fine. What was I going to say there? Oh, I totally lost my train of thought there. Shoot, I had something important to say.
doesn't sound like it.
Oh, I know it's gone. Uh, yeah, it's totally gone. Oh, that's what it was. I was going to say, for those of you watching this, you have no idea how many developers like we have spoken to over the years, and we find out, whether it be interviews that I did on the VR chat channel, or even just like in our emails that we've had back and forth with developers telling them about issues with their games, and how many developers who in the headset makes them sick. Like
Yeah.
they're making a VR game and they're like, "Oh, I can't play without click turning." What are you making a VR game for?
No,
Like,
no, kid. Now
this
I'm gonna
might
stop.
not be
No,
this
no,
might
no,
not
no,
be for
no, no,
you,
no.
bro.
No. I'm gonna stop you right there because VR sickness is a thing, and I don't like. Sure, like put that guy in the headset, it makes him sick. Then yeah, sure, put the comfort options in there to accommodate for that. But don't remove the comfort options for people that don't need that. Like, don't just it's click turning because it made us sick. Okay, fine. That's totally fine. Like if VR made me sick, I would still play VR. If I had to play click turning to get through a game, I'd happily do that because I love VR that much. So, but to remove features to remove something like smooth turning because it made guys in studio sick and not have it in there for like the masses, that's insane. Like
Okay,
that is
I guess what
insane.
I'm getting at is that some of these teams, though, whether even if they're small teams and and none of them are comfortable with playing the game like properly, uh, that's a loaded statement, but then you need to get people in. You need to get some people in who do play the game like full out, because what happens is you get like either no smooth turning, or if you do, it's too slow. It's not well implemented because they couldn't play it to test it. I've heard that many times too. They're like, oh yeah, we could have done that, but we didn't feel comfortable playing it like that. Like we couldn't play it, so they just don't. I'm like, you're making a VR game. Like, I
Mhm.
guess it's like, I mean, that's the ultimate stay in your lane. If VR makes you sick, maybe you shouldn't make a VR game. Now,
I
I
disagree with
will
that statement.
say, I will preface that with the fact that I do know a lot of developers. They're like, yeah, but they're like, you have to see the state of the game that we have play tested through, where it's like 10 frames per second and it's dropping frames and it's like glitching out in the headset. And so yeah, they end up playing it in like a safe mode just for their own like brain uh well-being, right? I get that, but it still blows my mind how unaware some developers both in the AAA scene and in the indie scene can be to what is just like the bare minimum standards that I think that we're all starting to kind of agree on in this VR world. And so
Mhm.
that's where I come back to the fact that like this stay in your lane. It's like you need to know what you're making, you need to know how to make it.
Yeah.
And get the people, even if you're a small team, like decide what your strengths are and what you can actually do properly. I don't know. I mean, there's
No,
there's
I think you just said that perfectly. Honestly, as far as we've waffled back and forth on both sides of this conversation because, like I said, we've provided lots of examples of developers who blew us away with something we didn't think they could do. But it's both sides, and like I said, and honestly, I'm pretty sure if we were to do the math, the games we were blown away by probably are outweighed by the games we were disappointed by when it comes to smaller dev teams. And I think what you said is exactly on point. Know the scope of your studio and understand what you can do and what you can't and what you're comfortable with. And like I said, research as far as ports and everything else goes. But so that's the staying in your lane part. It's not so much like indie stay indie. We want these studios to grow. We want them to become better and be better. And we'll go back to the Arc and Age guys. Can't remember the name of the studio now. Legend. What's their middle game? Mervils.
no.
What's the other one?
Oh my god, you got me. Now you got me off. I
So
have.
stupid.
Here's the problem. I have this brain.
Shadow Legend.
Yes.
So, but
It's Vitruvius VR.
Vitruvius. Thank you, Vitruvius. So, of course, we always want to see these studios go from the Vitruviuses and become these crazy the studios that make amazing games. And obviously, there's growing pains to that. I understand that, but same thing as Max. Go back to Richie's Plank guys. Go from Richie's Plank to Max Mustard to me is a pretty big improvement. That proves to me that these guys can make VR games beyond just walking on a board, and that's awesome to see, and we want to see more of that. But like I said, when you get these, the Aspire devs or so many others that have just dropped the ball when it comes to their games, whether it's lying about their game or the scope of the game or whatever. Or just it's just disappointing. So like that's to me what you just said there was like staying know your lane and and realize what you can do and don't try to go above and beyond that unless you have a pretty idea what you can do, because if it disappoints then in VR very rarely is there second chances. There just isn't the market for second chances. So if your game fails on arrival, it's really hard to dig yourself out of that. Like the No Man's Sky situation doesn't happen in VR. Games just get lost in the shuffle, and if you fix them, I mean, like I said, the Foglands guys have been fixing their game since October,
and no one cares.
And yeah, like I said, I'm gonna dive back in just to see. And I actually was one of the reviews that I think was more positive than a lot of people out there, and I give it a 6.5, I think. So it's not like it was like glowing, but no one cares, man. Like, I mean, people have moved on. Your game's already been burned. Like, it's like, well, how much can you fix? And that's also another takeaway. Like, make sure you do it right the first time, because VR doesn't really offer second chances.
No, that's true. And I would say, like, I mean, I hate to do this because you actually kind of had the perfect summarization to the conversation, but I do want to hit on one point that you made me think of, is that when it comes to staying in your lane, I don't think it's as simple as just VR and flat and then decide like where what are you making and can you do it properly? Can you do it justice? And what the scope of your game is. It's also staying in your lane. I think right now, I guess the biggest irritation to us VR gamers that have multiple headsets and have experienced, PC gaming and PSVR gaming and Quest gaming and all those, is that sometimes I feel like developers need to really stop and go, all right, should I make this request? Like, it's like, that's where the money's at. Fine. But really, does my franchise does this franchise deserve better? If it's a franchise already, like City Skylines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, you shouldn't have made that game for the Quest. It shouldn't have been made for. And if you're going, well, that's the only place to make money right now in VR. Good. Then shelve that idea and wait for the Quest 4 or even the Quest 3 now. And I really do think it's like it's not the time. Like, it's when when a developer jumps in on like what they feel like they can cash in on the VR scene, because they look at maybe they look at low hanging fruit in the VR scene because we buy everything that looks remotely good. Because we do have a reputation as being like software whores, right? Especially in the PSVR community, I think, because we're hungry for it. Is that it's just like that's also stay in your lane. It's like you did more harm to the VR industry that I would imagine they're hoping will grow because it's supporting their game by doing a game that doesn't deserve to be on there yet. Like Tropico, I haven't played it yet. It looks ugly as shit. I mean, it really, really does. And I haven't played it. Maybe it plays great, but it's like, but I'm not. gaining anything from this. Like visually, I'm like, it's such a visual downgrade. I mean, yes, okay, maybe I get to look at my whole little world, and that's gonna feel cool. Is it worth it what I'm gonna lose? I don't know. I haven't played it yet, but I'm gonna guess it's a city skyline situation again. You know,
Mhm.
we've got Zombie Army coming out in VR. I'm really concerned about that game because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I played Zombie Army. I played the Zombie Army trilogy, and those games, like, it's just hordes and hordes and hordes and crazy. It's like it's a massive shooter game, and playing with your buddies and stuff, it's chaos, and that's kind of like how that game plays out. And it's like, and it's coming to Quest. Okay,
Metro.
I trust you. And it's like
Metro.
Metro I have more hope for, because I feel like those first two Metro games, which were my favorites before they went open world with Exodus, plays in the tunnels. Just like I think BioShock 1 would make a great VR game because it just makes sense. I mean, those are games that I feel like stay in the lane.
Come
Like,
on, Flat VR Studios, BioShock. Just
yeah,
that's do that for their first game, and we have total faith.
those games make sense. They play on all their strengths. Just like, oh, I had to get this in here. Grid Legends. No, you shouldn't have made that a Quest game.
That's an
No.
excellent example. That is a
No.
stain. That is exactly. That's good.
Bad Codemasters. Bad. It's like that game had no right. No right. Yeah, it's like, you know what? No, Codemasters, make a Lego race. How about you do that instead? That would be better. I just, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm getting at. I don't want to get off too much into that in that side, but I think it's needs to be said that developers have to take. I really wish they would take a hard look at the limitations of the Quest and decide whether they should really make that game for that system. And if they're like, well, the money's not there if we don't go Quest, then maybe you shouldn't go Quest. Not yet. Not yet. Maybe. And I mean, and that's why some of these developers do more bite-sized games. Like, for example, like if somebody said to me, look, Sniper Elite, we can't make that core game. It's not going to work. Can't make it, at least at the time it came out, it's not going to run on PlayStation. It's not going to run on Quest, and it's going to take a beefy ass PC to run this game properly and deliver the Sniper Elite series. Would you like a more bite-sized version of that? When it comes to Sniper Elite, I'd be like, yeah, okay. I actually think they did a pretty good job. They did a better job than Metal.
I agree.
Now, is Zombie Army going to be the same thing? Am I going to come away feeling the same way? I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's Rebellion. It's the same guys. That's right.
Yeah, maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to say, like, I definitely have concerns.
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely hear you. I think we're kind of treading water here in regards to that, but I definitely, yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, these neutered versions of games is not what we want. We want to hear, if you see Wolfenstein beside your game title, you want Wolfenstein. You don't want
Yeah,
Wolfenstein Cyber Pilot. Like
that
it's just
and that would be a perfect example. That's the counterpoint to the Sniper Elite VR, where I was like, okay, I kind of got what you did here. It plays like, I get it. It's more bite sized, but I'm feeling like I'm getting the flavor here. This is good. This is still good. Then there's Wolfenstein Auto. What the hell was that? Something
Cyber
Pilot?
Pilot.
Cyber Pilot. I was like, oh god.
It had hidden
they
3D rudder support. If you remember that, I don't know if
they
you remember that or not.
Yeah, I know. I remember that because they just jammed it in there in an update. Because they were debating. That was the thing. We talked about a couple episodes, guys, about how Bethesda and 3D Rudder were in talks about getting it in, like I was saying, in Skyrim, and they wanted $200,000 to implement. And Rudder was like, "Yeah, we're not even worth that." And Bethesda was Wolfenstein. That was another one where they were debating about it, and it was in, and then it was out because like they couldn't come to an agreement, and then it kind of got left in the code. Haha. But they took the worst part of Wolfenstein. I played that game. There was a part where you got in the mech, and they made a game about it.
Yeah, no, this is the whole staying in your lane thing. Chris, we could wrap this up. I did want to put this out there though, to the guys who are still here, because you guys are obviously the hardcores. We're always looking for new ideas for each week, each episode. We try our best to come up with stuff that's topical and on point. But that being said, we are open to suggestions. So if there's stuff you guys want us to talk about, we're more than happy to take suggestions. Don't do it now. Do it in the comments after.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, if it's something that we think there's something there, something we can kind of chip into, we'll be happy to do so, because VR market's always changing, always moving, and we're too negative Nancy. So if there's something positive you want to talk about, definitely more for that. I know. I'm just looking. You got to say it, right?
I'm
You
super
got to do it.
positive. I'm super
But yeah, so just throwing that one out there, I guess. Congratulations to everyone who won codes this episode. I'll be doing the same thing again next episode as well. So if you guys own quests, you're getting games. Chris, you want to say your goodbyes to everybody we love?
Jenna bringing it in with the class at the very end there. Jenna kicked off the show with her subscription to the channel. Again, for those of you who are interested, we had some people asking about wanting to support the channel through the YouTube subscription thing, and then you get like a bunch of you get a badge and you get some emojis and this and that. Jenna was the first one to jump on board with that. She's awesome, and then she left a super classy comment. Yeah, I did jam it. That's right. Salvador, you're awesome. Salvador is our man. If you guys are a big supporter of the channel, he's one of our patrons. If you guys are interested in doing that, of course, that always helps the channel. So do the super chats. Anything that puts money in my
Oh, shut up! Shut up! Like I said,
No,
it helps the sport channel, guys. I mean, we are a small channel, so anything does help. Like I said, this is why we try to give back codes and try to give back to you. This is not like we're trying to steal your money. We are trying to give back as much as we can. And like I said, as a channel member or a Patreon subscriber, every now and then I do throw a code specifically to you, and you guys do get the pick of the lot. So I tend to give you guys the best codes we have in stock. So there is that. And depending on how this channel goes, if our time frees up, we always plan on doing more with you guys as far as live streams and everything else. It's just a time thing. We are just busy with life and trying to survive the incoming apocalypse. So,
and
yeah.
yes, I am going to be getting back to doing reviews. I promise. Actually,
maybe
Medieval Dynasty was supposed to be my return to form, and I did drag. I'm still trying to get out of my health rut that I was in, and I did drag my ass. But damn, that game was huge and so bad.
Hey! Watch the beginning of the episode. Then we're not gonna get back into that.
I'm just saying. That game was supposed to happen, and then we're gonna let her buck on here. So hopefully you guys enjoy these quickie reviews that we're throwing in. We've trying to limit ourselves to like 1 or 2 in front of an episode if there's games that we played that we haven't had a chance to get out. So if you're enjoying those, let me know. I'm going to be like I said, those will be released independently. Like you saw, our Happy Funland video last week got released as a not so quickie. I can't help it. I talk a lot.
Yeah, I think Medieval Dynasty will be even longer than that.
No, it's not. I was watching. It's gonna be shorter because I'm gonna cut out everything you said.
It felt like a long time.
So did playing it. And on that note, say goodbye, Ryan.
Goodbye, Ryan.
Goodbye.